So I grew up in the 90s and I started to develop a full adult figure when I was 13, 14 or so, which is very common for a lot of girls. But I grew up in a small town in India. And growing up in India meant that there was a lot of staring by a lot of men and boys of all ages, and I would just keep feeling so scared. I would just go out covering the chest with a drape or something like that, and I would just wear loose fitting clothing so as to not call attention to myself and to my body while I'm still trying to navigate how to go out in public and how to keep myself safe. I did not know where to shop for good bras, and there were not many good options for bigger busts. And then I entered my 20s and 30s, and a new kind of insecurity found its way into my brain. I started to question why I had sagging breasts, why they did not sit up perky and tight, like I see on a lot of girls on social media. Mind you, I am a doctor. I have studied the human body, so I understand the normal variation. However, insecurities have no rhyme or reason sometimes. They just find a way to make home in your brain. And then at some point, I started to observe that whenever they would show nude scenes on TV, the bodies of women looked more realistic and more relatable. And then I started observing that in art, whenever I would see paintings, it would show women with normal bodies and nobody's bust was sitting up and perky. They do go in different directions and they do have some sagging, especially if the size is bigger. But it still took me to actively focus and pay attention to rationalize this over and over in my head. But what does make me sad is how, in this day and age, young girls have so much influence from things that are not even real. Young girls are exposed constantly to the new beauty standards, which seem to be so warped. They seem to imply that if you don't like something about yourself, just go ahead and change it, which in isolation might seem like it's a decent idea. However, it starts to cross the line where young impressionable minds just don't understand that there is a variation in what beauty means. There is variation in how we all naturally look, especially women's bodies. Women's bodies change so much throughout their lifetimes and also throughout the phase of their menstrual cycles. They also change throughout the phases of stress, of lifestyle, of their relationships, their mental health. It's so many things that have an impact on how your body looks. And what's scary is that women like me grew up in a very different time. We did not have as much influence as women have now. All we grew up with constantly, at least in my case, in a culture like India, was about skin color, which used to be all about fairness being glorified, and thin bodies. However, all of these additional things about getting so many things done has gone to an extreme, and young impressionable minds don't understand discernment because that's not the time when they can be expected to learn about discernment. What they do latch onto is the glorification and the glamorization of all of that. If I and women like me are not immune to the idea, for example, of what breasts should look like and how they should sit on a woman's body, and we have to take a step back and remind ourselves of what is actually normal, imagine how young impressionable girls must be struggling. They would have an even harder time trying to digest and form a rationalized, informed perspective. And this is a shameless plug-in, but if you haven't already, please go check out my podcast, The Unhinged Poddy, across all your favorite podcast platforms, and let me know what you think. Let me know what you would like me to talk about more. I did cover one episode about beauty, and it was more of a kiki and not really a deep dive. I did try and share a few of my perspectives, and if you would like me to discuss something in particular, please let me know. I will go ahead and do some research and share more informed perspectives. I will always be for the girls.